Hello everyone, this is part 15 of What If Naruto formed a new team, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Shikamaru detested fighting girls. At the present time he viewed this notion from a totally new perspective. Rather than disliking them because of how distracted they could be or just being plain weak, he came to the conclusion that Tenten was someone who was not to be taken lightly. Even if she was a girl, Shikamaru did admit she was a fierce contender, as to be expected with the genin of Team Guy. I wouldn't fancy going up against that sand girl either. His mind supplied as a side note, and he shifted from one foot to the other uncomfortably, trying to ignore her focused stare aimed at his jugular and stomach regions. He doubted there were any shinobi their age who were more adept with weapons, male or female. He shuddered, wondering just how long it would actually take her to make him look like a shish kebab. And of course, hey, it just had to rush things. When you are ready, you may begin. Oh man, Shikamaru stepped back a few paces. I really don't feel like fighting right now. Her facial expression was one alarmingly similar to Neji's during the beginning of his own fight. He watched with near clinical curiosity as she procured a scroll and held it up to him. Shikamaru, this is one of my best weapons. I'm going to use it. She was frowning. Please don't make this difficult. For a moment he weighed the prospects. By best weapon, Shikamaru was relatively certain she had meant something that will end the fight quickest. Still, he wouldn't actually know what it was until she was made to use it. I think you already know that I don't like it when things get complicated. He formed hand seals, hating himself for provoking a battle he didn't want to take part in. Kage Shibari no Jutsu. Anticipating the attack, she leapt back well out of harm's way and opened the scroll, believing she had given fair enough warning. Shikamaru felt his knees quake violently as he saw an enormous Zanbato appear. Much to his shock, she leaned it casually on her shoulder, getting a good grip on its hilt. While the audience cheered in excitement at the scene, Sarutobi felt his blood pressure rise considerably. Genin weren't legally permitted to own or wield such swords in the Fire Country. He noted, however, that he was being a hypocrite to recall that, due to the fact that he had given her custody of an equally powerful weapon not too long ago. He decided to let the match proceed uninterrupted. Ino. Sakura was concerned as the blonde girl beside her began to hyperventilate, and Chuji was in a similar state. She'll chop him up like liver before this is through. Ino hollered and then stood. Shikamaru. Do something. The Nara could hear Ino's shrill cry from a distance and he grumbled. Her confidence in him was certainly helping. I work in all ranges, so there's no way I'll let you catch my shadow. Tenten informed him, hoping that if she stalled for long enough he'd change his mind and back out. She really didn't want a repeat of her mission in which she first encountered an Iwa Nin. Shikamaru briefly re-evaluated the situation, realizing Tenten had inadvertently given him an advantage. She's SB to hold that thing up. This doesn't seem as hopeless as I thought. Asuma puffed nervously on a cigarette beside Kurenai. He dearly hoped that his slothful student could come up with an effective strategy before anything unfortunate could happen. Naruto turned to Lee, demanding an explanation. Just what the heck is going on? Fuzzy brows. Is she gonna K him or something? Lee shook his head. No, Naruto-kun. Tenten uses Chinagui merely to intimidate enemies and halt their attacks. It is just as effective defensively as it is offensively. Ch Chinagui. Haku stuttered, his face turning very red. Lee nodded to him in confirmation, aware that Haku hadn't realized Tenten was able to fully use the sword he had given her. It is an odd name, but fitting, I think. Lee offered his opinion. Changing the name from Kauke to a name that literally meant wiping the B from a blade had an ominous undertone. Gaara watched with interest, wondering what would become of Shikamaru. The Nara threw 4 shuriken at her, aiming to buy himself some extra ground. He ran to the cover of trees near the arena wall as Tenten blocked the projectiles effortlessly with the big blade. Shikamaru pressed himself behind a tree trunk, thinking feverishly. Nearly a dozen plans flooded into his mind, and he had to decide which courses of action would bring him closest to victory and farthest from harm. Tenten frowned, expecting to fight less of a coward. Hiding won't do you any good. Shikamaru. She pulled back on the Zanbato and shifted her weight, beginning to spin herself in circles. This is bad, Asuma pointed out, taking a long drag, and Kurenai gave him an even glare. His student was in more peril than he would have been if he had been made to fight even Neji. Shikamaru squatted down below the tree, meditating, unaware of the incoming danger. Ha! Tenten hurled the blade with her built-up momentum and sent it soaring across the clearing and into the nettle of trees. The Zanbato hacked through the trunks with ease, and with a metallic ringing noise, embedded itself in the wall a few inches above Shikamaru's head. It had shaved a few hairs off of his ponytail though, leaving him a bit horrified. I don't think she was really aiming for my head, but still. He may have been calmer if the trees hadn't toppled over helplessly, leaving him in clear view of his opponent. Tenten threw a kunai, hitting a tree stump near Shikamaru and detonated the exploding tag attached to it, driving him out of his hiding place. He dove back out into the light, seeing an opening, cage shibari no jutsu. He barely missed, Tenten noted. She'd have to be more careful if she intended to avoid that potentially problematic jutsu of his. She threw another volley of kunai, driving him back towards the wall again. While avoiding her projectiles, Shikamaru kept a keen eye open for the shadows distributed about the arena. There were a healthy number of them, and he began to devise a plan of how to formulate a trap with his given resources. You're braver than I thought, Shikamaru. Tenten hurled another round of kunai as he charged, wondering if it was a mock assault. She was surprised to find it wasn't. One of her kunai shredded his shoulder as he soldiered nearer, too near, in fact. His shadow stretched again, reaching ever closer to its goal. Tenten panicked and drew out 2 more scrolls, Saoshoryu. Frustrated, he made note of what a clever move it was. As she rose higher into the air, her shadow began to shrink and became too small for his shadow to contact. The smoke released from her attack was enough of a buffer to stall him. In the stands, both Ino and Chuji were sharing in a frenzied conniption as their lazy teammate evaded the oncoming weapons raining down from the air. It was about as much as Sakura could stand, being that she had fought Tenten herself and no one then had lost their cool. Maybe they expect less of Shikamaru than they do me. Maybe it would actually be harder to fight her than even Neji. Naruto observed aloud, she's brutal. Lee nodded, that may be true for some ninja. Tenten has trained with Neji every day for the past 2 years. Her skills can be lethal if a shinobi cannot counter against weapons. Naruto looked visibly troubled by the news, but then concluded that he had defeated Neji, so he may have stood a fair chance if he had been pitted against Tenten. After ending her attack, Tenten was back to dodging Shikamaru's ever-persistent shadow as it streaked along the ground towards her. In a frantic moment of avoiding his jutsu, she had an epiphany. Tenten turned about and raced to the other side of the arena, scaling the wall with chakra and gluing herself to it once she felt she had gained enough height. Shikamaru was bent double, trying to catch his breath while keeping an eye on her. What the hell is she doing up there? She was beyond his physical reach, but unfortunately for Shikamaru he was not beyond hers. I'll end this now. This fight can't keep dragging on like this. Tenten summoned her Yumi and focused chakra into her right hand. From afar Shikamaru was already aware she was planning a long-range assault. This is such a drag. Lee's eyes widened knowingly and Naruto and his teammates had a feeling something serious was afoot. Tenten expertly fired a chakra arrow down at the Nara. Shikamaru had dodged to the side just after it was launched, but he had not been expecting the explosion that followed once it had struck the ground. The shockwave barreled him over, knocking him to the dust where again he had to regroup. Sato whistled loudly, impressed by her cunning attack. Tenten focused more chakra into her hand to prepare an arrow. One more blast can knock him out. He already looks dizzy enough to. She froze. A look of relief came over Shikamaru's face from down below, where he had stretched his shadow to an impressive length. Well, I've got to admit, that was really troublesome, but it looks like even you couldn't escape my shadow bind technique, Tenten. But how could he have? It was then Tenten noted she had caused her own demise. She had forgotten how many weapons she had scattered across the field after she had used Saoshoryu. Cleverly, Shikamaru snuck his shadow amongst the fallen projectiles, linking and weaving his own shadow through their own to get near enough to the opposite wall and ensnare her. He took a step forward and, unable to fight against it, Tenten fell forward off of the wall. She tumbled to the ground painfully. Lee flinched, looking heartbroken. More than anything, he had wished the beautiful flower of his team to obtain a glorious victory that would do justice to her youthful spirit. Shikamaru had stolen it from her. Tenten gritted her teeth miserably as she and her opponent neared each other with cautious steps. I can't believe I let him get to me. I was so sure I could avoid him that I didn't notice my weapons had shadows he could use against me. Her golden Yumi dropped uselessly to the ground after he extended his hand, with her mirroring his every movement. From the stands, Ino and Chuji were shocked and amazed at what they were witnessing. No way, Sato muttered from his place beside Team 2, I thought Shikamaru was an even crappier fighter than me, but it looks like he did it. Hayate watched expectantly as Shikamaru approached and then finally stood directly in front of Tenten. The match was nearly over, that much was clear. Tenten closed her eyes, waiting for the finishing blow. Neji, I'm sorry, I guess we both let our skills get to our heads, didn't we? Maybe it's better that we both lost, maybe it was necessary so that we just give up and move on. I just hope that I forfeit, Shikamaru announced casually without a trace of regret on his face. Tenten's chocolate eyes were very wide when he had said it. He turned to her, looking bored. I must have come up with 200 different strategies to beat you, but you're pretty damn unpredictable for a girl, and I'm totally out of chakra. On cue, his shadow retracted, freeing her. Hayate muffled a cough, admittedly not surprised Shikamaru had decided to withdraw. In fact, it was the wisest move he could make. The winner of the match is Tenten. Tenten's shock morphed into an amused smile. You know, Shikamaru, you're the only person who's ever bested me, besides Neji, that is. He looked at her for a long moment. You'll have to give that to me in writing because no one will believe me. Hands jammed in his pockets, the Nara trudged back across the clearing with her while she recalled her weapons. He's not so bad, actually, Tenten thought to herself, impressed with his brilliant tactics. From the balcony, Lee and Sato were cheering, in contrast to a very quiet and confounded Team 2. Asuma didn't hide the proud smile on his face as he watched his student return to the upper level. The Kazekage spoke in an entertained voice. What a talented Kanoiki, Hokage-sama. She will make a very fine Chunin. Chunin are not named for their power, but for their ability to guide and be sensible, I'm sure you are aware. Hiruzen retorted, he himself rather alarmed by Tenten's performance, though no doubt she is as talented as her parents were. The next fight was announced by Hayate. The third match will be between Temari and Haku. Naruto gave his friend a reassuring grin. You'll be great, Haku-kun. Just stay cool and everything will be fine. Haku shuddered involuntarily, unable to bring himself to look at Gaara. He wasn't half as angry as he had been the night before. In truth, anxiety had replaced most if not all of his bitterness. I know what this means to Gaara-kun, but I can't just back out. Gaara gave an annoyed look to Naruto as he cheered for Haku while he proceeded down to the arena. He didn't feel like wishing the dark-haired boy luck, but he couldn't bring himself to root for his sister either. It felt like he was torn down the middle as if he had some invisible zipper of shame. He stared silently ahead, watching as Temari disappeared down the stairs from across the way. Temari arrived shortly after Haku did. She scowled openly at him. She didn't like him and she couldn't for the life of her understand why he was Gaara's friend. Though she could see a few similarities, they were very different from one another and she wanted to put him in his place. Kankuro had told her to finish him quick and save her energy for later, when she'd need it. She planned to. Haku, much to her surprise, looked in that moment very much as docile as he had been during the preliminary rounds. I don't get these mood swings of his. Temari wouldn't let that sweet, demure face of his fool her, even if it nearly had. You may begin now. Hayate backed away and Temari had almost not heard him, being so caught up in her thoughts. With a startling burst of speed, Haku had attacked first, which she hadn't been anticipating. Temari was unable to open her fan before he had closed in, moving with the ease of a creature underwater, and landed a roundhouse kick that sent her crashing to the ground. Above on the balcony, Naruto glanced inquisitively over at Tenten and Lee, who were cheering, supposing they had something to do with his new ability in taijutsu. He'd thank them later. What Haku lacked in strength was compensated for in speed. He circled around Temari as she swung her iron fan down, missing him, and tripped her up with a devious slide tackle on his way past her. The crowd's keyed up roar filled Temari's ears and her bee boiled. She refused to be made a fool out of. As she stumbled, she opened her fan hastily, managing only 2 moons, but it was enough to blow him away. She smirked in satisfaction as he fell through the air. That was until she noticed him procure a summoning scroll. He's summoning something, that girly brat. Whatever he calls it won't do him any good. Temari did briefly recall Naruto summoning huge battle toads during his match. That memory alone was enough to make her slightly nervous of what his teammates were capable of. Haku's feet were planted on the ground again, and the scroll swirled elegantly around his arm for a moment before recoiling back to its original shape. Their stares locked for a moment and Temari paused, confused. What was that? A bluff. There's nothing here. She looked left and right to make sure he hadn't summoned any creatures into the arena, and was relieved to find there was nothing new present. Naruto turned to Gaara, a bit bewildered by Haku's theatrics. What is he doing? Haku-kun can't summon anything. Is he trying to fake her out? Gaara frowned. I honestly don't know what stunt he's trying to pull this time. Temari grinned at her opponent, crouched low to the ground in front of her. You must think you're very clever, huh? Stalling like that, you nearly had me fooled. Who's stalling? Haku rose to his feet, wearing a genial smile. Alone, fat raindrop landed squarely on the end of her nose and a growl crept from Temari's tea as she turned her attention to the sky. I don't believe it. Overhead the once sunny sky was thick with dark clouds that had gathered directly over the stadium. From behind Naruto and Gaara, Sato laughed aloud and they turned to him wearing questioning looks. He said something about a new jutsu he had learned, but I didn't know it'd be something as dorky as calling rain clouds. Sato tried to explain, half laughing to himself. Gaara's glare threatened the longevity of his face. There's nothing dorky about it if you have complete control over water. Sato fell very quiet. Oh, now that I didn't know. That's kinda cool. He had only thought Haku was capable of certain water jutsu, but never that he had a Kekkei Genkai responsible. Naruto chuckled at Gaara's irritated expression. The scattered drops of water quickly escalated into a full frontal downpour, making many members of the audience grateful they were seated beneath an overhang. Temari's bangs were damp and heavy within moments, clinging to her forehead uncomfortably. She was aware that this was one of the worst conditions a sand nin could fight in, being that she herself rarely ever saw rain of this magnitude, let alone battled in it. Haku held Senbon steady between his knuckles, his eyes scanning over Temari. Abruptly, he ran towards her, aware of every raindrop falling past him, launching them with a warning cry. Anticipating the projectiles, Temari revealed the 3rd moon on her fan, Daikamiteki no Jutsu. An even more powerful whirlwind knocked Haku and his Senbon into the air, see him repeatedly in the process. Haku-kun. Naruto leaned over the railing, not expecting him to be hit with such a powerful attack. Gaara's eyes narrowed at the sight. It wasn't like Haku to make himself so vulnerable. Haku fell back to the ground helplessly and splattered into a puddle of rain water. Temari's eyes widened, he substituted with a water clone. She looked around, horrified to see a dozen water clones surrounding her, all wielding Senbon. She hadn't even seen him form them, let alone heard them close in. Temari suddenly wished she had a bit more of a background in fighting ninja capable of water jutsu. If this is all you can do, I'm not impressed. Temari swung her fan in a huge arc, blowing away the incoming clones and needles as they approached. Haku amassed more and more clones with little chakra and she continued to stubbornly hack and S her way through them. Soon she'll realize she's only attacking water, which is not the best idea while it's raining. Haku wondered if Temari was actually aware she was only tiring herself out, or if she was possibly preparing a counterstrike. Deciding to get in close, Haku and a clone dove for her from behind. The clone landed a punch before she S it in half, and Haku aimed a few Senbon expertly at her exposed arm, hitting pressure points that would slow her movements. Hissing, she switched hands, to his shock, and attacked just as fiercely as she would with her other arm. The fan came sweeping down, and a blade of wind left a gash on his sea that stung like fire. Haku leapt back, trying to regroup, throwing more Senbon at her other arm. Unfortunately for him, she was more cautious than she had been before, and kept her functioning arm out of his range. He let his clones distract her as he inspected his wound for a moment. It was fairly deep and bled freely. He commended her on her ingenuity. I don't have time to heal myself, I have to end this fight. Temari see her way through the water clones, keeping track of the real Haku. It'll be easier to spot him in this rain now that he's B. Even his water clones can't fake that. Gaara, Naruto muttered to his friend, and he understood. Things were getting serious and he knew Haku wouldn't last long injured. Temari had finished the last of the clones and faced off against the waiting water nin who had more senbon at the ready. She moved forward and gave a small cry when she slipped and fell unexpectedly. The water on the ground had frozen over into a sheet of ice. Temari couldn't get sure footing on it and watched wide-eyed as Haku raced toward her with perfect balance. He fights dirty. He can walk on this like it's nothing. Haku reached her just as she had slid her feet feebly beneath her, and knocked her fan away while she was struggling to regain her balance. She snarled at him, swiped at his head and then dove for her weapon frantically. Her iron fan clattered to the icy ground where the incoming raindrops pelted it, freezing it like an icicle in seconds. Temari didn't bother to reach for it, knowing it would be a vain effort. He had deprived her of her weapon. Clenching her teeth in rage, she drew a kunai and glared at him, taking a step back warily on the slippery ground. She bumped into something solid and from afar she could hear the distant sound of Kankuro's shout. Temari glanced over her shoulder and saw her own face. Startled, she turned about completely, only to see an ice mirror, but this is. She turned back to her opponent who stood outside the house of mirrors that were forming all around her. It wasn't the first time she had seen it, but she suspected it may be her last if she didn't move quickly. Temari slid ahead over the ice sheet, accustoming her feet to the ground with chakra. It was a different type of water walking, but water walking all the same. The rain was becoming unbearable, and she knew it would be more difficult to fight and think clearly while she was shivering and sopping wet. I have an idea though. His strategy is so predictable. Haku disappeared into one of his mirrors and she steadied the kunai in her hand patiently. He reappeared in the mirror in front of her, looking just as tired as she. For a moment the bee that had soaked the side of his GI looked as if it would actually drip out of the pane of ice. You really are Gaara-kun's sister. I don't doubt that now, Haku admitted quietly. I have no intentions of harming you. You could have fooled me. Temari snapped in response, not buying his soft voice. Let's end this. He obliged her by leaving his mirrors a fraction slower than he would normally have and hurled senbon in threes. She blocked them as they came near, her keen eyes searching the mirrors he dashed through. Gradually he began to move faster, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to block the needles he threw. A few of them had sunk into her shoulder and lower back. They hurt terribly. Temari had managed to block the senbon aimed for vital areas, a fact she took pride in. From his fleeting reflection in a mirror to her left, she could see his blue GI was soaked a deep maroon. Does he want to be to death? It won't be long now. He isn't going to last much longer. Gaara was aware that Haku had strained himself to use so much chakra during his fight on top of being wounded. Should we do something? Naruto was doing his best not to become nervous, but it was very difficult. He's hurt pretty bad. I don't think Haku-kun's gonna win this one. Gaara could find nothing to say. He hadn't been able to foresee the outcome of the match between his friend and his sister, and now he was certain he didn't want to see the conclusion. He's only got a few senbon left. After this he'll leave his mirrors and try to slip me up again. Temari was predicting his future course of action. One blow to the head ought to do it. He's been weakened. Senbon came at her again and she raised her kunai to block them. It was a surreal moment in which the needles halted a few inches from her face and she s at them in confusion, wondering why they were icicles rather than the metal senbon he had been using before. It's a. Haku pitched his last two senbon. A decoy. The needles stuck in the side of her N as she stared ahead, not realizing he had moved to the mirror behind her while she was distracted. Temari shuddered, feeling everything from her chin down go numb. Oh. She toppled over onto the icy ground and the rain began to slow. Kankuro gave a frustrated cry from his place above the arena, unsure of what had happened. Haku, exhausted and in pain, dispatched his mirrors while taking a shuddering breath. The downpour ended shortly after, and the ice on the ground proceeded to melt away. Hayate crouched over Temari, inspecting her. That kid's got some aim, she's as a doornail. Naruto noticed as Gaara went rigid beside him. He recalled the day Gaara had once told him that Haku didn't K people, and wondered if his red-haired friend was going to reconsider his words. Oh, this is bad. Really bad? Naruto stared down into the arena. Haku-kun would never. Hayate stood up, his expression grim. The winner of the match is Haku. The crowd cheered wildly, most especially those who had placed the bets on him. Haku paused beside Hayate, putting pressure on the gash below his collarbone. Sir, she isn't S. The examiner gave him a skeptical look. She has no vital signs. Haku bent down and carefully removed the needles from the San Kanoiki Zen. He tossed the B senbon aside and stood up when she rolled over like a boneless fish, trying to regain consciousness. Gaara's facial expression relaxed and Naruto grinned at him. Come on. You know Haku-kun. He'd never hurt someone you cared about. Gaara had known that Haku wouldn't actually kill Temari, though it did startle him to see that he had the capacity to do so with ease. He was honestly glad that he had spared her from more pain, although it seemed that Haku had not received such generosity from Temari as he limped away with the medics while they tried to tend to the wound on his sea. From above, the Kazekage narrowed his eyes gleefully, not commenting on the fight. Hayate watched as Haku left the arena, impressed, shinjutsu-like that could take out even a Junin if they're not careful. The sky was blue once again and Temari was cleared by a medic before returning to Kankuro, who was a bit surprised to see her on her feet. Don't look at me like I grew another head or something, will you? She grumbled, peeved that she had lost. I'm fine. He just got a lucky hit. Kankuro calmed down a bit and smirked at his sister. Right, because you definitely were in control throughout the whole match. She punched his shoulder with what little strength she had left in her and he snickered. Hayate cleared his tea. The fourth match will be between Rock Lee and Uchiha Sasuke. The crowd's volume escalated significantly and he nearly had to cover his ears. Tenten gave Lee a pat on the back while he tore off on another youthful rant. Yes. Finally my match has arrived. Today I shall defeat a genius with my hard work and make Guy-sensei proud. Go for it, Lee. Tenten smiled at him, knowing he could hold his own. Once Lee had raced down the stairs, Haku had returned to the balcony looking a little less beat up. His upper C and shoulder were swathed in bandages and he had been given a white shirt as a replacement for his saturated GI. He took his place between his teammates and smiled thoughtfully. She really is just like you, Gaara-kun. Naruto nodded sagely. See. I told you Gaara, you're like clones of each other. Does everyone in your family have a bad attitude? Gaara blinked at the blonde boy, not seeing how he had made his observation. Haku chuckled, playing along. Maybe there's a hereditary cantankerous gene in Suna that's responsible for. There is just as much a trait for being irritable in my gene pool as there is one for you two being idiots. He hated it when they ganged up on him, but it was preferable to fighting with them. Naruto and Haku laughed at their friend as he folded his arms and scowled. From the stands, Ino turned to the pink-haired girl beside her. Sakura, just where is Sasuke anyway? How can he be late for his own match? He'll be here. He's been training all month for today. Uncertainty winced over the pink-haired girl's face, and she turned to Kiba beside her. He will be here, right Kiba-kun? Akamaru relocated to Sakura's lap and Kiba frowned. I haven't seen him since yesterday. I really can't say what the hell he's up to if he hasn't shown up by now. Worry dominated Sakura's expression and Ino chuckled sheepishly. Don't worry, billboard brow, I know he'll be here. Hey, what could possibly make him want to throw this match? He's up against that crazy kid from Team Guy. Sakura gave her a dark look. Don't underestimate Lee like that. If he's anywhere near as strong as his teammates he'll give Sasuke-kun a really hard time. Once Lee had descended down to the arena, Tenten didn't miss his disappointed expression upon seeing his opponent was still missing. Don't sweat it, Lee. Even if you win this match by default because he doesn't show up, Guy-sensei will still be proud of you, and maybe in the later matches, you'll get to fight me. She laughed silently to herself. That would certainly be an interesting fight. Hayate glanced down at a pocket watch he had with him, keeping track of how late the second genin was for his match. This can't end well. I don't mind calling this bout, but all the gambling lords up there won't be too pleased on losing their bets right now. Many people had money riding on the Uchiha. With a sigh he glanced over to a patient-looking Lee and then up to the Hokage. Since the opponent has failed to arrive, victory automatically goes to. A swirl of leaves blew into the arena, directly in front of Hayate before he could finish his announcement. Naruto blinked a few times before he was able to confirm it. Hey. He decided to show up. He turned to Gaara. Looks like you get to watch Lee give Sasuke a thorough beating after all, eh, Gaara? Gaara didn't bother hiding his smirk. It had been something he had been looking forward to seeing. Below, Sasuke stood back to back with his sensei, standing in the midst of the windstorm. Kakashi looked up from his book and smiled sheepishly at Hayate. Hi there. Sorry for the inconvenience, I hope Sasuke isn't late or anything. Hayate glanced up to the Hokage again, and after receiving an approving nod, he turned to the Uchiha prodigy. You came close to forfeiting your match. If you're ready it will begin momentarily. Lee, though thrilled, kept silent as Sasuke stayed behind while his mentor went up to the stands. He was still reading his book. Hayate cleared him to begin and Sasuke regarded Lee for a moment, before asking, they say that you can't use either ninjutsu or genjutsu. You really expect to win this fight with only taijutsu? Lee smiled, unimpeded. Yes, that is correct. But I will not need those skills to match you, for I have trained harder than any ninja to be where I stand today. If that's true, you won't mind if I restrict myself to taijutsu as well. The Sharingan appeared in Sasuke's eyes for a brief moment, and Lee felt a s of insult at the boy's words. Rather than loiter, he took an offensive stance which Sasuke mirrored perfectly. So this is what Guy Sensei meant by the power of the Sharingan. He recalled everything his sensei had warned him of. I will have to be twice as diligent if I am to triumph in this match. Sasuke attacked first, lashing out with a speedy jab that Lee countered reflexively. Lee was startled once Sasuke countered his own maneuver with ease, and knocked him back with a kick that seemed more of a warning than an assault. Sakura and Kiba looked on apprehensively as the fight intensified. They themselves were unsure of Lee and Sasuke's full strength, so the outcome of the match was still unclear. Gaara's eye twitched for a moment while he observed. The Shukaku's angered growls had grown much louder at the sight of the Uchiha, and he was beginning to suspect the demon also had a deep loathing for him as well. He wasn't going to try to find out why that was. In a blur of movement Lee vanished, and Sasuke allowed himself to be kicked into the air, watching as Lee appeared beneath him. His arm bindings secured around Sasuke. The Uchiha had seen this move once before, but this time he was paying attention to it. Front Lotus. Lee turned downwards, dragging Sasuke with him, and pile-drived him headfirst into the dampened ground. The recoil was heady and Lee leapt away, his arm bandages still slack. From the balcony, Tenten was cheering louder than even Naruto. Lee grinned up at her from the ground level after hearing her ecstatic shrieks. He looked a short distance away to the impact crater in the ground and saw a demolished log. It appears I have forced him to use a substitution jutsu. I should expect he will use more jutsu once he is stressed. Sasuke stood a fair distance away. He had decided the match would end more quickly and in his favor if he utilized his impressive repertoire of ninjutsu. Lee looked up questioningly to his sensei, who was watching from the stands like a grinning fool. Guy merely gave him a thumbs up, approving of Lee's unspoken request. Lee took a moment to remove weights hidden beneath his leg warmers, and Tenten fell silent, seeing things had just become more serious. Lee dropped the weights and the ground imploded where he had dropped them, due to their tremendous mass. Kakashi glanced over at Guy for a moment, finding his training methods just as old-fashioned as they were ridiculous. Sasuke raced through hand seals, katen, grand fireball jutsu. The intense flames s down a moment later and Lee had appeared behind him within the blink of an eye, avoiding the fireball completely. Sasuke was pleased to see he had gotten a reaction and his eyes blazed red with the full strength of the Sharingan. Suddenly, Sasuke was nearly as fast as Lee. There was little the audience was actually able to see other than two blurs meeting and parting, and the painful sounds of violent contact that followed. For watching shinobi with trained eyes it was a marvel to behold. The blows exchanged were ruthless and timed, and Lee had found that within seconds, Sasuke was able to mimic his movements and counter nearly all of his attacks. Sakura was wide-eyed as the Uchiha prodigy kicked Lee into the air in imitation of Lee's earlier attack, and got a firm hold on the older genin, preparing his own variation of the front lotus. Lee was too shocked at first to struggle, and was just barely able to break free before being subjected to his own technique. He tumbled away from Sasuke, kicking up mud, and found himself offended that one of his prized attacks had been tarnished at the hands of his opponent, Guy-sensei. I will win this match. Forgive me, but I will do what I must to preserve my ninja way. Tenten recognized the opening of the second gate and was fairly sure Lee did not aim to stop there. This isn't good. Why's that? Sato was curious as he stood next to her, snapping a few pictures of the fight. This is the part where bones get broken. It appeared as if she had put it very mildly, not wanting to admit that something worse was a possibility. Sato reacted in the only way he knew how, cool. Gaara sighed from his spot nearby, hoping the silver-haired nin would be less oblivious in his own match. Sasuke had decided to bide his time, analyzing his foe's weaknesses as he built up more and more chakra, so he can open chakra gates. I've heard of something like this but I've never actually seen it. Guy seized the opportunity to boast to his eternal rival, Lee is able to open 5 of the 8 chakra gates, Kakashi. I would advise you be prepared to pull Sasuke from this match should things become too dangerous. Kakashi turned his head slightly, I suppose. But you do know that saying, Guy, to never count your chickens until they've hatched. Are you comparing my student to poultry, Kakashi? I challenge you to a contest of honor. Sure, Guy. Later, Kakashi waved him off, looking back to the fight. Lee's speed was phenomenal with his surplus of chakra and he was landing merciless blows on Sasuke, left and right, many of which the prodigy could not defend against. Sasuke managed to exert some of his own chakra to lessen the blows and counter, but the pain was distracting at a time when focus was everything. 4th gate, open. Lee's chakra had caused a small gale to form, and he had wasted no time in preparing for the 5th gate and the hidden lotus. He had hit Sasuke hard enough to send him skyward again, but was short in his attack by a pain shooting up his spine. A dizzying moment later, they were descending, and Sasuke was jabbing him with electrical strikes that were intended to paralyze. Lee recognized the assault, in his preliminary match that Cloud Ninja was able to stun him in this way. I should have. He leapt away, finding it hard to slow down with the enormous momentum he had built up. The earth beneath Lee's feet had been softened from Haku's rainstorm, and it disintegrated at the presence of his tremendous energy. Sasuke had taken a spot high up on the wall as Tenten had, Lee noted, and was also regrouping. He no longer intended to fall prey to any of Lee's lotus attacks. After a few short hand signs, Sasuke gripped his left arm as chakra crackled to life noisily. That's what Sato used in his preliminary match and Kakashi Sensei too, Sakura muttered to Kiba beside her, Sasuke-kun learned it. Looks like it, Kiba narrowed his eyes, but he's stronger than Sato, so this time it should turn out like it's supposed to. From his place on the balcony Sato took a picture, evaluating Sasuke's form, looks like Kakashi taught him too, bet Sasuke didn't have to beg though. Kakashi likes his own students more than he likes me. A small frown flickered over the boy's face, I'm not jealous. I'm not. He's never liked me anyway so what do I care if he plays favorites, that selfish bastard. Sato didn't admit it, but his relationship with his remaining kin was not a good one. Lee watched pensively as the Uchiha prodigy prepared his finishing move. I have come so far to become strong and do my best as a ninja but he is indeed a match for me. If I am to succeed in this fight I must surpass my limits, for Guy-sensei, for Tenten, and for Neji. To prove to them that my ninja way is the path of a true shinobi. Lee steadied himself, preparing to open the 5th gate. He had only attempted it once before and he knew that it was a gamble to use it during the first match. Guy had never expressly told him not to and he believed that Guy would step in if he felt it was unnecessary. Near his center, chakra surged through the newly opened gate, fueling his muscles. Sweat evaporated off of him as radiant steam and the rapid circulation of B made his skin appear red. Sasuke was careening down the wall, concrete with screaming chakra in his hand. Lee focused and then charged at his opponent. By then both Guy and Kakashi were compelled to intervene, but knew that doing so may get someone inadvertently K. They made no move to stop their respective students. The cheering had slowed once Sasuke had reconnected with the ground, making a beeline for Lee as he built up chakra, at a speed barely perceptible to the human eye. No way. Naruto watched in awe alongside his silently astonished teammates. In a fraction of a second, Lee met Sasuke's jab with a counter, surrounded by a corona of turbulent energy. The light from the resulting collision made the proceedings difficult to distinguish even by carefully observing Anbu. Lee had built enough speed to partially avoid Sasuke's initial strike, but the Chidori raked up along his arm mercilessly, leaving open, burning lacerations in its wake. Refusing to be stopped by the terrible pain, Lee offered up his wounded arm to block, and after pinning Sasuke's flailing free arm, knocked him back with a flying kick so powerful it sent him careening to the opposite side of the arena with a violent explosion of dust and mud, reverse lotus. Lee fell back with the speed of an earthbound meteor and met the ground in a similar fashion. Silence had unexpectedly taken over the audience while dust hovered in the air, making it impossible to determine who was still left standing. Hayat cautiously neared the center of the arena, and nearly lost his footing in a massive ditch that had been carved into the earth. Beyond him he could see a form face down in the baking mud, vainly struggling to stand, and then became still with exhaustion. Looks like Lee's had it. He turned to see Sasuke across the way, also falling unconscious after suffering such a massive blow. They were both lucky to avoid the worst the other had to offer. After a very long moment, Hayat cleared his tea as the dust cleared. Both opponents are unable to continue, so this match has been declared a draw. A ferocious tumult of cheers and cries of disdain followed thereafter, and medics rushed back out into the arena, looking horribly overwhelmed after witnessing the damage. Both Guy and Kakashi were too stunned to say anything after seeing the power displayed. Even though it had a horrendous outcome, Tenten didn't fight the swell of pride in her see after seeing how Lee had kept up with Sasuke. She jumped down to the ground level, intending to wake Lee up and congratulate him on a fabulous draw, though he would be none too pleased to hear about it. Kiba studied Sakura's astounded face for a long moment as Akamaru tried to snap her out of her unblinking stare. Certainly she was frightened, he could tell that much, but there was something else in her expression that he did not fully recognize. He'd venture a guess it was something close to inspiration. Gaara had decided it was a match not worth complaining about. Naruto was ranting to a gaping Haku beside him as they watched Lee and Sasuke be escorted out of the arena. Holy yes. What was that? Did you see that, Haku-kun? Ha, I bet I looked just as cool in my own match. At about the same time, Guy had also gathered enough wit to rave about the fight. What a glorious spectacle of burning youth. My student utilized the fifth gate all in the effort of countering the Chidori. A marvelous feat, is it not, Kakashi? Kakashi blinked over to him stupidly. Did you say something, Guy? From the opposite side of the stadium Temari turned to her brother, quite unnerved. Looks like you're next, Kankuro. Don't take too long. Baki said we'd be mobilizing before the end of the first round matches. He gave her a suspicious sideways glance. Did he tell you anything else? What? Well, no, he didn't exactly have an itinerary planned yesterday. She frowned at the thought. In fact, he hasn't really explained anything insofar as we hold off the Leaf Ninja. Temari faced her brother. What does that mean? It means we've been denied information. Kankuro folded his arms, troubled. I think more than just an invasion is going on here and I can't help but think we shouldn't get involved. And how do we do that? Temari hissed, upset he was deciding to back out at such a late time. He won't let us withdraw just because we've seen Gaara. He doesn't even know we've noticed him at all. Kankuro, how are we supposed to fix this? It's too late now. Gaara, her eyes lowered, he's one of them. He isn't just one of them. He snapped, trying to remain calm and failing miserably. He's one of us. Our brother. Are we going to K his friends just because we've been ordered to? Are we going to K all of them including him? No. She was indignant but frightened. Of course we wouldn't. Then what do you suggest we do? I don't know. Temari admitted in defeat. It doesn't look like there's anything we can do, Kankuro. I didn't come here expecting to see him. He was supposed to be S. We can't let this happen. Kankuro was trying to come up with a plan before his match started. Maybe during the confusion we can get him out of here. How? Temari didn't like the sound of it. How are we supposed to explain all of this? We can't. He looked down into the arena in annoyance as Hayat announced the next match. When I get back, we've got to think of something. She nodded solemnly as he proceeded down to his match, feeling a frog in her tea. Temari knew that there was little they could change when they themselves were unsure of what to expect. I can't believe Baki hasn't ordered us to do anything yet. It's like we're leaving all of the work to Sound and Cloud. She was also aware that if they did try to spare Gaara from the madness he probably wouldn't have any of it, knowing that they had conspired against his village. In short, the only way they could make a difference would be if they switched sides and defended the Leaf, which is out of the question. She looked over to where her baby brother stood beside Naruto and Haku, and she could still feel the dull sting of the spots where the water nin had hit her with senbon. I'm sorry, Gaara. I didn't want this for you. Kankuro stood near Hayate in the arena, disguising his anxiety with boredom. Hayate looked rather perplexed that another genin had decided to be late. Nearly 10 minutes had passed, and there was still no sign of him. It did briefly make Kankuro wonder, what was his name again? Dosu. He's with sound. Maybe his orders were changed and he couldn't show. Hayate could tell from the look on the Hokage's face that he'd rather not waste time. Kinuta Dosu has failed to appear and has hereby been disqualified. Winner of the match by default is Kankuro. Kankuro did not miss Gaara's approving smirk from above on the balcony, and he couldn't ignore the twisting feeling in his gut at the sight of his younger brother so unaware of what was about to happen. He ventured back up to the stands, thinking frantically of what could be done to avoid disaster. By the time Kankuro had reached Temari, Baki had arrived. You two have new orders. Their sensei's voice was grave. Temari, how bad are your injuries? She looked up at him, slightly irritated. It's nothing really. I can fight. Baki nodded. In that case, start preparing now. We've received word from Sound that the attack will begin in this arena and you are to prevent any Leaf Shinobi from interfering. Interfering with what? Kankuro was confused. When does it start? Orochimaru intends to release the Ichibi in this stadium, Baki announced, overlooking their horrified expressions. The signal should be coming soon now. But that's crazy. They can't do that to Gaara. I mean, how is that possible? Temari couldn't believe what she was hearing. That would mean that a Jinchuriki is. Do not let anyone interfere. Those are your orders, Baki repeated fiercely, not wanting their input. When you see the signal, meet me on the ground level and we'll proceed from there. He was gone before Kankuro could protest, but then again, he figured it wouldn't have much of an effect on the matter. He hadn't known they planned to actually use Gaara in the attack. This is worse than I thought. He muttered, changing his plans of action. We have to act now. Temari nodded, her expression dark. On the signal we get him out of here. Below, Hayate was calling for the next match. The sixth match will be between Hatake Sato and Gaara. Sato raced past Shikamaru and down to the arena, glowing with determination. Grudgingly, Gaara turned to Naruto, wondering if he had any advice to give on the silver-haired boy. Naruto shrugged to him unhelpfully, just finish him quick, I guess. Don't make it more painful than it has to be. Haku couldn't think of anything heartening to say as Gaara moved to the stairs, taking his time as he went down. He did wonder how Gaara planned to deal with Sato. Hinata tensed beside Shino, watching as Sato appeared in the arena with a cheerful bounce in his step. From a short distance away, she smiled as she heard Tama begin cheering for him wildly. Are you sure this is a good idea? Asuma asked slowly, noting Kurenai's troubled expression. She sighed at length. I admit, Sato has grown much over the time he has been given, but I am unsure of the fight's outcome. Shikamaru stepped up beside Naruto and Haku to watch. You two may have to step in, to prevent AS. This match is far from even. Naruto did not answer him, because even if Shikamaru was being sarcastic, he wasn't far from the truth. With Gaara's seal faulty, Sato was in more peril than he would normally be. Haku-kun and I have to be ready if anything weird starts happening. Gaara looked up to the Hokage thoughtfully as he stepped out into the sunlight. He had considered asking for his help after being unable to find Jiraiya, but he knew that he would only be pulled from the exam altogether if he expressed his concern to him. At least with his perverted teacher he'd have a chance to fight unhindered. His gaze traveled guardedly to the Kazekage a short distance away, his father. The idea barely registered in his mind. At the moment, the Lord of the Sand Village seemed the farthest thing from his father, leaving a strange, bitter taste in his mouth. At the sight of Gaara's arrival, Sato had an attack of nerves. Just stay calm. Stick to the plan and everything will fall into place. Gaara was totally relaxed as far as he could tell. Sato gave him a weak grin and asked, Hey, Gaara. I hope you're not a supporter of the whole turnabout is fair play idea. The red-haired boy shrugged, not sure what he was so worked up about. You may begin. Hayate stepped back, wondering how evenly matched the opponents honestly were. Tama's encouraging cries could still be heard clearly from the stands, and Guy and Kakashi returned their attention to the make-or-break fight of the final rounds. Sato immediately formed hand seals and created 10 fire clones, preparing his first strike. Gaara was taken aback at how similar the strategy was to one of Naruto's attack patterns. Undeterred, sand began to surround him and he waited for the Hatake to begin. A few of the silver-haired replications leapt clear over Gaara, nearing the opposite side of the arena. As they scaled the walls with chakra and wire, Gaara could already tell it was the same tactic Sato had engaged in his preliminary fight. He wasn't much bothered by it. Traps would do him little good in this brawl. The other observing genin recognized the strategy as well, wondering if it would produce the same results. While the clones busied themselves suspending weapons on the wire network above the arena, Sato held his ground, facing Gaara. He then deployed a new method of attack. He drew both Kodaki steadily, watching Gaara with calculating eyes. You know I'm not half bad with these. Gaara folded his arms, not impressed. He'd be crazy to attack him head-on, though he wouldn't put it past him. A sand shield began to form around him reflexively as the blades glinted in the sunlight. Sato leapt upward, startling Gaara, and balanced himself perfectly on the crisscrossing wires. On cue the clones ended their labor and dove for the opponent in unison. Gaara's sand ravaged them, buffering the flames, and while he went about crushing the clones, Sato methodically plucked stray lines of the netting with his Kodaki to trigger the traps. Kunai and shuriken rained down from the air and Gaara paused to let his sand shield block the assault, leaving him to ponder how to get near his opponent if he held the advantage of higher ground. In this fight he realized it would give Sato an edge. Sato continued S-specific wires from his vantage point in frustration, dismayed at how Gaara continued to approach unhindered by the waves of projectiles. I've got to pick up the pace before that sand of his gets too close. Gaara blinked up at him, knowing he wouldn't put up much of a fight. The battle remained little more than a child's snowball fight until Sato was reduced to his last trap. He S-through the remaining wires, releasing a Fuma shuriken that he had planted explosive tags on the day before. Gaara's eyes widened briefly and he dodged, his sand shielding him from the blast. It was almost humiliating to be stuck in such an uneventful fight, so Gaara intended to make it more dramatic. Sand lashed out at the last suspensions and snapped them, intending to return the silver-haired nin back to the ground to even the odds. It was once Sato bit his thumb and formed seals on his way down did Gaara realize that Sato had expected him to dismantle the traps. Naruto's hands S down onto the railing in disbelief. He's summoning something. Haku watched as well as the smoke cleared and a truck-sized bird flapped about, disoriented, as if bewildered by the brightness of the stadium. Sato landed squarely on its head, grinning, let's go. I know you're sleepy but it's time to fight. The bracken-colored bird was still too dizzy to respond and floundered about pathetically before attempting to land, which was a mistake on its part. Gaara's sand swarmed as it came nearer and crushed the bird instantly, leaving Sato to jump off frantically and form more seals to call another. What is going on? It's like he had no control over it. Naruto observed, disgusted with Sato's sloppy form. Naruto-kun, I don't think it's really his fault, Haku remarked quietly, making his friend turn to him questioningly. Didn't you see what he summoned? It was an owl. Most tend to be nocturnal and now isn't the most appropriate time for them to fight. It must have been sleeping when he called it an owl. It was pretty big too. Naruto scratched his head, though I thought he'd go for something goofy like a kangaroo or a giraffe. That kid's such a bird brain. Shikamaru muttered, not impressed. Sato successfully called a second owl, this one a mix of white and brown plumage, and it appeared fully alert. He landed on it as it settled into a comfortable glide and avoided Gaara's sand. Sato berated himself for his inexperience. Only recently had he begun summoning his contracted animals and he had been using one main bird for most of his aerial techniques. He admitted it wasn't fair to call an owl into a battle that wasn't well acquainted with him. He decided he'd remedy that later. It was a fantastic feeling to be able to avoid Gaara with ease, and Sato felt that if there was ever a good time for him to end the match it would be then. Get ready, Gaara-kun, I'm going to finish this with my most powerful jutsu. The bird climbed higher, beyond the reach of the stadium, forcing those watching to tilt their heads up to observe. Gaara suspected Chidori after seeing him use it once before, and then seeing Sasuke use it correctly. He had a feeling he might try something else after seeing him summon owls. He has only recently mastered this attack under my supervision, Kurenai informed Asuma as he watched the shrinking form of the bird ascend. It is a finishing move. Gaara will be lucky to escape it. Asuma gave her a quizzical look and then took a drag, wondering how her eccentric pupil had managed to turn the tables so abruptly. Kakashi felt an odd sensation develop in his stomach as he watched his nephew rise up into the local sky. He takes after his father after all. Guy laughed jubilantly beside him at the notion. Indeed, he would make Rie proud. Sato drew out his trusty chain scythe, recalling how it had failed him during his use of it in his preliminary match. Not this time, though. This time I'm ready. His avian escort provided a second chain sickle that had been concealed in its down, and he took it gratefully. I'll see you around, Kataiku. I can take it from here. The bird's voice was concerned. Your wings are still smaller than his. Don't do anything foolish. He had worried for the boy's safety, but departed in a cloud of smoke obediently. Sato moved upward with the leftover momentum, a bit unnerved by the terrible height, and Gaara was a mere dot below him. If I do this right like last time, then maybe I won't. It was something he looked forward to. He spun the chains with great effort, and in seconds the centrifugal force upheld the motion and he began to fall downward again with speed, letting himself be thrown into a wild spin. Gaara watched the rapidly gyrating Nin descend, and prepared himself a thick shield, wondering if it would do him any good. This attack will be massive if it hits. I need a way to avoid it. Naruto and Haku were alarmed as well, not suspecting that Sato had been able to broaden his arsenal. In contrast, Shino was very pleased by such an unorthodox assault. Hinata held her breath, horrified of what would become of the two combatants. The velocity of the rotation had distorted his vision, but Sato was aware his target was drawing near as wind whipped past his ears, carrying the cries of the excited crowd along with it. 1,000 chains of Saturn. The spiraling sphere of blades met the earth and tore up what was left of the even ground, kicking up a storm of debris and forcing Head to take cover in a nearby balcony. Gaara disappeared from Naruto and Haku's sight. Gaara. The blonde called down into the thick cloud, the sound of chains still horridly audible, and he received no answer. Below, unseen to those trying to watch, Gaara's sand had managed to pin one of the chain sickles, embedding the blade into the wall next to him, which was scored with hundreds of S from the reckless assault. The second chain of the brace, however, was still in motion and was tossed in a sweeping arc toward him. Gaara dodged clumsily, barely avoiding the high-speed weapon as it hacked at his sand armor. He watched as Sato struggled to stay on his feet, wobbly yet resolute. Sand captured the second chain, buying enough time for Gaara to render it useless and wrench it from Sato's hand across the way. He had been too dizzy to retrieve it, and opted for regrouping while in the cover of the dust cloud that was quickly clearing. Two fire clones attacked Gaara as a diversionary tactic, while Sato attempted to come up with another way to end the match. The debris cloud disappeared and Naruto was cheering once again to see Gaara in one piece. This is the best exam ever. Tama called down to Sato encouragingly, pick up the pace. You can still win this. Gaara crushed the pair of clones, avoiding their fiery after effect and turned to Sato, give up. If that was your best technique then this is over. Sato hurled a kunai past Gaara's left ear, nicking his cheek, and it embedded itself in the far wall behind the red-haired boy. Something had been amiss about the attack, and Gaara glanced over to see if the kunai had an explosive attached. Although it didn't, a small tag was there with the character for singularity. It was baffling, but he decided not to stress about it if it wasn't about to blow up. I don't use forbidden jutsu often, but you and your crew seem to be a bad influence, don't you think? He formed hand seals, his expression grim, forbidden summoning, prison gravity. That explains the kunai. Gaara glanced back at the glowing tag, unsure of what the exact function of the jutsu was since nothing happened immediately. Kakashi frowned. He knew that Sato would have one last trick up his sleeve. That jutsu can put everyone in this stadium in danger if he's careless, but if he uses enough chakra this match is over. Weapons that had been scattered over the gouged ground, along with wires that had been torn down earlier, began to shudder and slowly shimmy in Gaara's direction. He didn't overlook the strange force being exerted from the wall behind him. Gaara chose to react too late, finding it difficult to move against the direction the mass behind him was pulling in. He glued his feet to the ground with chakra, refusing to be pulled back against his will. Sato, a ways ahead of him, watched carefully as if he were waiting for something. In moments, kunai and other discarded weapons were being pulled in by the strain, soaring past Gaara in the most bizarre, unearthly fashion. It wasn't much later that his own sand shield began to tear itself apart and be pulled towards the amassed gravity point. It was then he felt slightly worried. Sand was his main offense and defense, and he wouldn't be able to go long without it. From the balcony, Temari and Kankuro were just as horrified as Gaara's teammates. His footing was no longer adequate, and Gaara felt the massive power behind him draw him in like a helpless leaf in a gale. He s into the wall painfully, his gourd dissolving back into sand. Sakura stood up, wide-eyed. Gaara-kun. By then, Gaara had acknowledged the fact that he was utterly immobile. I'm completely vulnerable. Somewhere in the back of his mind he could hear the Ichibi declaring vengeance on the Hatake, and he did his best to ignore its incensed yowls. Take my chakra and crush him. He is but a worm exercising power that is not rightfully his. K him and show who possesses the true power here. It was a very tempting offer, but chakra wasn't going to do him much good if he couldn't move freely. Up on the balcony, Lee and Sasuke returned after being inspected thoroughly by Mednin. As a result of opening the fifth gate, Lee walked slowly and carefully, exhausted from the strain it had put on his body. His right arm was heavily bandaged and in a sling, and Sasuke did not appear in much better health either. Lee was still so thrilled over his match that he had been raving about it to Sasuke the entire time the medics had been tending to them. Sasuke endured the excited chatter. He too had to admit it was extraordinary. Below, Sato was preparing to use the Chidori even as the gravity he had called upon began to slowly drag him in as well. He had stolen the technique from the archives and learned it before Kakashi had pried it out of his hands. Sato had searched for a way to immobilize a foe because he lacked the Sharingan as a means of improving his accuracy. He narrowed his midnight-hued eyes purposefully. This is it. Now I can prove to my team and Tama that I really have become stronger. Stunning, was Lee's first word on the scene. It appears as if Sato-kun has copied Sasuke, who has copied Kakashi. I really can't say what's going on, Lee, Tenten replied meekly, unnerved by the proceedings. Below, Sato was half running and half being dragged by the misplaced gravity pulling him in, the Chidori's light blurred into a beam with his speed. Naruto grimaced as he watched, warning Haku, Gaara's in trouble. Sakura observed in horror, disbelief written all over her face. This jab is worse than Sasuke's. It's moving with so much force that Gaara-kun he might get. Sato crashed headlong into the red-haired shinobi, hitting him in the shoulder with white-tinted chakra that sang like thousands of birds. The recoil knocked him back and the gravity jutsu abruptly wore off, dropping all of its imprisoned contents to the ground with a clatter, Gaara included. His scream was not audible over the Chidori's chirping. Sato stumbled to his feet, panting and completely out of chakra. Gaara clutched his bee shoulder. His expression dark and his breathing was labored. The bee was everywhere, soaking his side and was splattered on the wall behind him. His sand hovered inexplicably all around him as if just as stunned as he was. I'm sorry, Gaara-kun, Sato said quietly, totally exhausted. I guess this fight is over. Kurenai had nearly had a heart attack from her place in the stands. She was grateful to see both genin still alive. Gaara stood shuddering. He was unable to recover or defend himself. The wound would force him to admit defeat. You fool. You cannot deny my power. If you will not end this, then I shall. The idly floating sand came to life and latched onto Gaara's arm, forming a sort of claw-like appendage. His face was twisted with fury that was not his own, and his eyes locked onto his target, who would be too weakened to escape. He isn't backing down even after all of that. Reluctantly, Sato drew both of his kodaki again and took an offensive stance. How is he able to keep going? Gaara's sand lashed out at the Hatake viciously, knocking him back. Sato s at it vainly, trying to keep it at bay, yet it continued to swarm mercilessly around him with an unprecedented speed. We have to get down there. Naruto had feared the idea of Gaara losing control, but hadn't truly expected him to be pushed so far. Haku also agreed it was time to intervene. They both abandoned the balcony and made for the arena. Sato had lost his grip on his weapons while trying to avoid the sand that had encased him in a coffin, knocking him down to the ground. He did not realize Gaara was not himself. Hey. I give. The sand smothered him, silencing his cries as it obscured him entirely. Hayate wasted no time in calling the fight. The winner of the match is Gaara. Gaara ignored him and from his place above the Kazekage restrained his mirth. The Hokage had not noticed the Kazekage's laughter, being he was too absorbed in his own shock of how Gaara could lose control of himself. He contemplated going down into the stadium to repair Gaara's seal, but doing so in front of an audience could jeopardize his idini as a Jinchuriki. What's happening? Sakura was alarmed that Gaara had not let Sato go. Kiba could only think to address the obvious, looks like, he's gonna K him. What? Why? The pink-haired girl was frantic, he would never. Tama was already on her feet and ready to act, but could think of nothing that would help. Gaara. Naruto and Haku had caught the crazed teammate and began to grapple with him, fearing he would crush Sato, snap out of it. Naruto had tackled his demonic arm while Haku settled for his left arm, nearest his wound. The blonde boy's hollering had actually forced the Ichibi back somewhat, reviving Gaara's true consciousness. It was a battle to get back in control, but he was at least able to see what was happening. He saw how Haku and Naruto had not abandoned him, how he had won his match even after suffering such a terrible wound, and how Sato's life hung in the balance. Shukaku was still infuriated once Gaara had banished it back to the corners of his mind, and he dispelled his sand instantly, releasing his captive. The sand receded and Sato was still, laid askew on the ground. Hayate quickly moved to him, surprised to see he was able to draw breath. The medics that had earlier been upset by Lee's match were in even more of a frenzy at the sight of this fight's injuries. They went to the unconscious Hatake first. Hinata and Shino looked on, dumbfounded as Sato was removed from the arena in a near-death-like state. Kurenai shared their terror. I told you that you shouldn't have done this. Naruto hissed in Gaara's ear as he came to, looking just as bewildered as he was in pain. Come on. We'll get you out of here and we'll find Ero-sensei. You'll be okay. I'm not, I can't just. Haku interrupted Gaara, putting pressure on the wound. Stop it. You're hurt badly. Your seal is not stable enough for you to argue. Haku added in a low voice, not wanting to clue in any eavesdroppers. Gaara-kun, please, you'll be fine if you. Gaara knocked him away, still too disoriented to focus on what needed to be done. He was in too much of a panic that he had exposed his Biju captive. Hayate neared cautiously, unsure of what had happened. The audience was in a state of true confusion and did not take notice as they drifted off to sleep. A genjutsu spread from an unknown source and some shinobi were able to quickly dispel it. The rest dozed off in their seats, unaware of the impending danger. Sato was already long gone with the medics, but Gaara was in no state to cope with his victory. I will not lose control again. He fled immediately in a gust of sand, not giving his teammates the chance to prevent his escape. Gaara. Naruto's cry was seashort by an explosion near where the Hokage was seated, and it was then he noted that none of what had happened was merely a coincidence. Someone took advantage of Gaara-kun's craziness. He narrowed his fiery blue eyes. Hokage-sama will be okay, but Gaara-kun won't if we don't follow him. Naruto turned to Haku, looking determined. Haku, let's go get him before anything else happens. A bit stupefied by what had transpired, Haku looked to his friend and slowly nodded in agreement. He followed after Naruto as they left the arena with speed powered by fear. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.